What's up guys, Nathan here. I'm sorry this video is a little bit late, but last night when the notables came out, I decided to go live on my Twitch channel and read through all 281 of them. It was really great, no regrets, but when I was done my voice was a little bit shot, so I decided to turn in for the night. If you're interested in checking out a recording of that stream, I will be linking to it in the description below. But for those of you who don't have 3.5 hours to spare, I wanted to put out this video where I go over my absolute favorite nodes that were revealed to us yesterday. These include nodes that I think are super powerful, very unique for what they provide, or just plain interesting. I'll try not to talk for too long about each of them because I'm not trying to put out another 30-minute video. So without further ado, let's jump into the list. The first notable that I have for you today is Gladiatorial Combat. Now this one was very early on the list and it's not very flashy, but it can provide a very reasonable amount of damage for builds that invest in having decent shields. I think the one that's going to be jumping out to a lot of people is the fact that you get this crit multi per ES on your shield. So if you're going to be rolling with a pretty fat shield, say around 400, 450 ES, that could very easily translate into up to 40, 45, or even 50% crit multi. You can also get a decent amount of increased damage if you're using an armor shield, like for example a Lionized Fall, or maybe a crafted armor shield if you're playing something like Spectral Shield Throw, and that can easily amount up to 40, 45, or 50% increased attack damage. Great synergy with low life, CI, or of course Spectral Shield Throw builds. Next up, we have Deep Cuts, and anybody who's played an Impale build or hasn't been sleeping under a rock for this past couple leagues can just take a look at this and know just how insanely powerful one extra Impale is. At the most baseline sort of implementation, if you have a 100% chance to Impale and nothing else going on, this is an additional 10% more damage on your Impale multiplier. It also gives you this 15% chance to Impale, which in my opinion kind of pushes this away from sort of champion ascendancies that already get a lot of Impale chance and a lot of extra Impales, and sort of moves them more towards Slayers and Zerkers, which will really, I think, get the most out of this. Not much else to say, it's just an absolute shit ton of damage, and I bet this is going to be gated pretty far behind the item levels in terms of how hard it's going to be to roll these. Intensity is very similar to Deep Cuts in the sense that it's not very complicated, but it gives an absolute metric fuck ton of damage for a notable. Intensify is almost always going to be a best in slot damage support for AoE spells, and this node increases Intensify's max multiplier from 64% to 80%. Of course, you can stack multiple of these. I don't know how hard that's going to be, probably on the more difficult side, but hey, even just one of these, it's definitely worth it in single target scenarios. Menders Wellspring has a lot of interesting stuff going on. First of all, we have this pseudo bleed immunity, and I say pseudo because it's not actually immunity. All it does is remove existing bleeds on your character. So if you're in the, for some reason getting a lot of corrupting blood applied to you, or you're just getting bled over and over again, you're not going to be immune, but it will remove existing bleeds, which in some cases can replace your anti-bleed flask in mapping scenarios. It also gives you a good amount of life flask sustain for bossing. So this is basically a worse Soul over Slotha, but you can actually keep using your life flasks regularly and it's not going to prevent you from gaining those charges. Also, flask life recovery is a pretty underrated stat in my opinion, especially since this is going to free you up to roll a different mod rather than the bleed immunity. So maybe you can roll something, I don't know, I guess it doesn't really coincide with things that will give you more amounts of life, but I do think that just specifically being able to get more bang for your buck every time you press your life flask is very strong. Next up, we have Haunting Shout, and really I just want to sing the song of all of these fantastic new Warcry nodes. All of them are just everything that I asked for and more. It's so beautiful I could freaking cry out here, but Haunting Shout specifically does give you Intimidate and Unnerve for free, which are both 10% increased attack and spell damage multipliers respectively. Specifically, it makes the enemy take 10% increase, so depending on how much increased stuff you already have, it has varying amounts of value, but pretty much any spell or attack build will be happy to fit either of these things in. We also have a Warning Call, which gives you big deeps. We have Cry Wolf for utility and also indirect deeps. And then we have Mob Mentality for free rage gain. This one would not be as strong on something like Berserker, but it would be very strong on any non-Berserker Ascendancy. And I would honestly hazard to say with all of the increased cooldown recovery speed we're seeing on these nodes, you could very easily play a Warcry focused attack build on pretty much any Ascendancy. You don't have to be a Berserker. And even if they buff Rallying Cry just a little bit, I think that's going to be enough for me to just totally want to start with Warcries, even though I have no idea how rare or hard to roll some of these notables are going to be. Martial Mastery is just the epitome of holy shit, that is a lot of attack speed. 600 strength is a little bit out of the budget for most Marauders. I think you're not going to be naturally hitting this number. You'll probably be chilling around the 350, 400 mark, but pushing that extra 100, 200 strength is not going to be that difficult, especially if you're playing something like Juggernaut, which of course you want to stack up a nice amount of strength to get all that free accuracy, or if you're using, for example, the Warlord Helmet mod that allows you to gain accuracy equal to your strength, maybe slap this on a Chieftain, and then suddenly your Chieftain is turned into a discount Juggernaut, except for not discount because you're actually dealing a shit ton of damage because you're a Chieftain as well. Anyway, this is just an overstated as hell amount of attack speed, and I think it's a really cool node, and I'm excited to try it out. Next up, we have Devastator, and this one was already teased to us, but I think it's really cool and powerful, so I wanted to talk about it really quick. It's basically a discount explodey chest with a little bit of RNG, which means you're not going to be able to just kill one enemy and then chain across an entire pack with a little bit of scaling. No, I think this is going to probably pair best with sort of physical attacks that already have a decent amount of AoE, so you can hit maybe like half or like an entire pack, or, you know, just at least deal like a little bit of consistent AoE, something like Earthquake, Bladestorm, Cleave, Sweep, Ground Slam, maybe even Cyclone, so you kill multiple enemies, and then chances are with a little bit of consistency spreading out that RNG sum, you're going to get the explosions, and then it's going to pop, and then you're going to get those chains. So maybe this is a little bit on the OP side. I could see this one being gated into the item level 80, item level 84 plus jewels, but it's really cool, and it's locked to attack builds. Not saying that makes it, you know, super balanced, but that definitely makes it a little better than it being just global like the Explodey Chest Crusader mod. Seal Mender is a very simple notable that is a very strong buff to one of my favorite supports that I really need to play more. It takes the sealing time of a level 5 Woke Unleash from 0.66 down to 0.51. This is a huge DPS gain, especially if you're even remotely darting around and letting that build up. You can couple this with +1 seals on a Redeemer helmet, as well as the +1 seals on the Annoy. I think it's called Thunderous Salvos, and you can just make Unleash so powerful, and you can have absurd amounts of burst that is regularly going to be resealing as you sort of run in circles around a boss and sort of just click once and deal an absolute shit ton of damage without having to scale cast speed at all. Supercharged is another very simple notable at the end of the day, but it's a huge damage buff for Elemental Overload Lightning builds. Now, I don't think this is going to allow these kinds of builds to totally scale up and actually compete with high-end crit builds with things like Diamond Flask, Bottled Faith, Assassin, just all kinds of that crazy shit you can get from crit, but I think it's going to make budget builds that want to focus on other aspects like maybe survivability or utility. It's going to give them the ability to deal very competitive damage without having to invest in damage the same way that crit builds have to. Cold to the Core is a node that I think got a lot of people's attention, especially with the popularity of cold stacking bow builds. Obviously, if we look at something like dex stacking builds, you could easily push over 900, 1,000, 1,100, 1,200 dex, and you can get these numbers up to probably, I don't know, between 45 and 55% increased cold damage. That's pretty solid. It's not the biggest multiplier in the world, but I think in some cases it is going to be a best in slot choice as far as what you're pathing around if you're doing something like frigid spam on these cluster jewels, trying to hit something that's good for your build. It could also be good for strength stacking cold conversion jugs. Obviously, that's a little bit more niche than the bow builds, but hey, as long as you're stacking up a lot of stats or maybe just a lot of one stat, you're going to be able to get a decent amount of damage from this node. And to say the least, it has a very interesting design, and I'm happy to see something like this get added into the game. Fan the Flames kind of fits into the same category in a lot of the ways. It does give you free Ignite Prolif, and I think if you just look at this and you don't think about it too much, it looks absolutely overpowered as hell, but honestly, it's not that amazing because the base radius of 15 is a little bit on the small side. If we compare it to something like Ignite Prolif, the gem itself, I think that goes up to something like 20. Something like Storm's Gift, I think also gives 15. It's just not the biggest AoE in the world. And also the Ignite Prolif support gem itself is actually a significant multiplier. And you can slap that on your Ignite builds and you're not going to be hurting your overall damage. And of course, it's going to give much better clear overall. But I mean, hell, you know, Prolif on a non-ascendancy notable, I mean, this is just too cool not to feature, so I had to talk about it. Cooked Alive is a very cool multiplier, and although I would probably have liked to have seen something like this on the other elements because fire already has access to combustion, it's a bit of a double-edged sword because even though you're already going to be getting a lot of negative res from combustion, it means you're sort of ensuring you've already built with this playstyle where you need some sort of secondary skill to imply combustion with Ellie focus on your main skill. So you're going to be igniting enemies almost always if you're playing some sort of fire damage build, and this just synergizes so well. You're always going to get that ignite and that extra 15 15%, especially for something like an elemental overload build, can just guarantee that you immediately proc combustion, you get that negative fire res, and then you get a bunch of extra negative fire res from this node as well. So it's not the most exciting node in the world, but I think this is going to be a huge damage multiplier in some situations. Cold Conduction is probably my favorite notable on the entire list, and it's kind of just like Skitterbot Lights in a way, but obviously you don't have to reserve mana, but you do have to path to it. You win some, you lose some, but either way, it's a really cool notable. It's either a really strong defensive layer in the form of a 10% chill, that's what a baseline chill value is for any lightning build that can consistently apply shocks, or it's a strong damage multiplier for cold builds, because as long as you're doing a little bit of chilling, you're going to get that 15% increased damage taken. Either way, I think this is a very interesting and unique, well-designed notable with a lot of strength behind it as well. Really excited, definitely going to be playing a build that uses this at some point. Surging Vitality is a notable that I'm kind of split on how useful it is, but I think there are some builds that kind of lack a lot of sustain that are going to see a lot of value in this. First of all, it gives you a nice chunk of life and regen, but it's important to note it's a bit worse than some of the existing nodes on the tree. For example, you can compare it to something like Golem's Blood, which gives significantly more life and significantly more regen. However, that extra mod is basically like a MIDI Guardian mod or a Hunter Chest, I think also has access to this, and I'm not sure how it's going to actually feel, but I've played Guardians before, and if it's even just a fraction of that, getting that proc when you're getting kind of low, you're in sort of a stressful mapping situation, maybe you get hit hard by a boss and you don't flask right away, I really do think this huge chunk of regen that you're going to be getting from time to time is going to feel really good, and there'll be some low sustain builds that are going to look at this node and find it very desirable. Energy from Na is an extremely boring notable that is very good for CI League start builds. Basically, if you don't have a lot of ES in your build, you're just running Discipline and whatever you can get your hands on, it's going to give you a huge amount of ES to your overall total. However, as you continue to sort of improve your character, you get a chest that gives 500, 600, 700 energy shield, the value of this notable is definitely going to go down. And just looking at this right now kind of just reminds me of the old pre-nerf occultist, and it kind of makes me sad. But, it's still good, and I think people should keep an eye out for it early on in the league. Confident Combatant is a simple node that just gives a huge overstated amount of damage for max block builds, or even moderately invested block builds. It's a very simple increased generic damage node that gives you 1% damage per chance to block attacks. Max block builds easily push over the 70, 75, 80. I think the maximum you get with the right shield investment is like 84% these days. And if we're talking just even minimal amounts of investment, 70% increased generic damage is extremely overstated for a notable. Even if we start to go in and just compare to some of the other generic damage notables available just on this page alone, Confident Combatant has the potential to push way over the threshold in terms of what's actually worth using once you've created yourself a little bit wheel and you're looking for things to fit into your build. Born of Chaos is a node that I think a lot of people are going to be glossing over, but personally I have this thing for Divine Flesh builds, and this is like absolutely exactly what you want to see for a Divine Flesh build. This translates to obviously 3% max res for Chaos, and then 1.5% max res for elemental resistances, the way the damage gets split. There's really not much else to it. I don't think really any other build is going to see a lot of value in this, but Divine Flesh builds, man, is this thing pog. I really like this notable. Arcane Pyrotechnics is a deceptively powerful node specifically for trappers. Obviously, it does affect miners as well, but mines you're almost always going to be skilling a little bit of mana anyway, because you have to spend that mana if you're going to be actually casting your mines and getting them out there, since it reserves mana, and then it's very easy to throw on a Flame Dash Arcane Surge setup and get your Arcane Surge that way. Trappers, on the other hand, really popular to run EB, especially with things like Tinkerskin, Diadem, because you don't need to be reserving your mana for mines or anything weird like that. Because of that, it can be a little bit tricky to fit in Arcane Surge since you can't readily spend your mana. However, you can just use this little node here and you're going to get that 10% more spell damage multiplier, which is of course a huge damage buff for any spell trap build. Pure Agony is another node that's kind of framed to sort of be good for two different sort of archetypes, but really at the end of the day, I think this is a very strong node for Herald of Purity. It's basically a 20 to 25% more damage multiplier, depending on whether or not you have the Helm enchant, and I don't think this is going to actually do much to make Herald of Purity not feel clunky to clear with, but it's a huge damage multiplier, and Herald of Purity was already a pretty decent bosser if you invested in it properly and were able to get your hands on some nice Herald of Purity rings. The last node that I have for you guys today is Wrapped in Flame. It is Righteous Fire, the node, not much else to say. That 1.5% regen and that 15% fire dot multi are just very overstated. There's not much else to it. Obviously, you get a little bit of burning damage as well. That's really nice. Overall, this is just kind of an auto include for Righteous Fire builds. I don't know how many people are out there, like all 3 people that still play Righteous Fire and sort of the current Path of Exile design meta. But yeah, if you actually are willing to play RF, this is a node you're definitely going to want to go for. And I love how overstated and powerful it is for that specific build.
Thank you!
Thank you so much to my Patreon supporters, Real Human, Zikrak, Squally, Zoljan, Coda, Julia, Alan, Kepler, Sparky Cat, Putzak, Kaiser 801, Kyle, Logan, Ice Dude, Ginzing, Anonymous, Orangina, Marius, and Alex. You guys are awesome. You make my life very bearable and, easier, and I can eat food, and I can sometimes get Taco Bell because of you guys. So thank you so much. I appreciate the support. If anyone else is interested in joining these fine folks, you can check me out at patreon.com/NathanBrotherBob, or if you have a Twitch Prime laying around, or you just, feel like coming by and saying hi, you can check me out on twitch.tv/NathanBrotherBob. I stream every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday at 2 p.m. Central Time, although that schedule is definitely going to be a little bit different because of League Start, because I'll be playing this game a lot, as most content creators do. And then if you just, don't want to throw money at me, but you want to say hi or just support the community, you can check out my Discord right there in the bottom right-hand corner. That place is fun. We got some cool people. We just hang out, talk about PoE, get hyped about notables, get hyped about patch notes. Oh yeah, patch notes. Oh shit, patch notes. Oh God. Okay. Well, I'm also going to be live tonight reading patch notes. So yeah, check me out, around whatever, 8 p.m., 9 p.m., whenever they come out at my Twitch channel. Thanks. Bye.